Welcome, everybody. I'm Karen Sullivan, publisher of Orenda Books, and I can actually see from the list there that there's a lot of familiar names here, so I won't go on too long about who we are and what we do. But for those of you who don't know, we are a small independent publisher based in London, and we publish literary fiction with a heavy emphasis on crime thrillers. About half of our list is in translation, and we have one of those examples here tonight. We won the CWA Crime and Mystery Publisher of the Year last year, and tonight we'll see two shining examples of why. We're thrilled to welcome Germany's Queen of Krimi, Simone Buchholz, and all the way from Dunedin in New Zealand, the wonderful Vanda Symon. So, Hotel Cartagena, which, like all of Simone's books, has been beautifully translated by Rachel Ward, who we will hear from a little later in the program. This is the fourth in the Chastity Riley series, and it is a breathtaking example of Simone's electric, crackling, original crime fiction. It's a unique contemporary spin on American noir, I think we'd want to say. In this book, we see Chastity in a hostage situation, trapped in a hotel bar overlooking Hamburg Harbour, and it's blisteringly authentic, thought-provoking, a really timely read, but it's also an absolutely heart-pounding thriller. So we met Simone for the first time when she joined us with minutes to spare 4 years ago on the Liverpool stop of the Orenda Roadshow. And she was an instant hit with readers and our entire team. We launched Blue Night, the first book in the Chastity Riley series, in Warwick a few days later during The Beast from the East, and we haven't looked back since. Simone is an amazing talent and such good fun. If you catch her in real life, in fact, I should have prepared her for this, you could ask her to show you her immense beer coaster flipping record sometime. It's impressive. I have a video of it. I should post it. Okay, now we're going to move to Vanda Symon's Bound, which is also the fourth in her series, the superb Sam Shepard series. And what a success this has been. So it's rich in New Zealand atmosphere and culture. It's full of cunning twists and exceptional plotting. This series and this book take police procedural to a whole new level, and its shining strength is Sam herself. She's young and headstrong, full of integrity, and most importantly, so human, so identifiable with her problems at home and work, and her determination to do her job, even when her personal life is falling apart. This too is undoubtedly the best in the series so far. When Sam goes vigilante, her colleagues are happy to go with the easy option when a popular local businessman is murdered, his wife bound, gagged, and forced to watch. But Sam thinks differently, and there's a new level of emotion in this book, I think. I know very few readers, in fact, who haven't been moved to tears, me included, as always. So Craig Sisterson, who is leading the proceedings tonight, and who I'll introduce properly in a moment, is Vanda's champion, and I guess you could say pusher. It was Craig who thrust a copy of Overkill into my hands, and he would not stop pestering. No, I'm kidding. He would not stop reminding me until I'd read it. And so I sat down on a train to Scotland with Overkill, which is the first in the Sam Shepard series. And I was so engrossed, so rapt by this book, I missed my stop by 2, which in Scotland can be a considerable distance. Anyway, I knew at that point we had to publish Vanda and this series. And that was the beginning of a very happy relationship and friendship with Vanda, who is a regular guest in Casa Orenda. And if you heard earlier, she almost didn't leave when the virus struck last year. And now Craig. So Craig is a familiar face on the crime fiction circuit and a massive supporter of Orenda Books. He is a lapsed lawyer from New Zealand, hence the connection, who now lives in London, and he writes features for newspapers, magazines in several countries. In recent years, he's interviewed hundreds of crime writers and talked about the genre on national radio, top podcasts, on stage at book festivals on 3 continents. He has been a judge for the Ned Kelly Awards, the McIlvanney Award, the Niall Marsh Awards. And he is co-founder of Rotorua Noir, which is in New Zealand, and he might tell you a little bit about that later. And obviously that didn't happen this year. But anyway, his very first nonfiction book is this one. It's called Southern Cross Crime, and it's published by Oldcastle Books last year. This is another example of pandemic publishing, so let's support him. It's a privilege to have him here with us tonight. A tiny bit of housekeeping before I get off your screens. Signed copies of Bound and Hotel Cartagena are exclusively available from our partner Four Bears Books, who is here with us tonight. This is a little bookshop in Reading, fabulous bookshop in Reading, that has actually struggled to open its doors for the first time because of this pandemic, and we are eager to show our support. So you can contact them at Four Bears Books UK at outlook.com, I remembered it, yay, or send a message via Twitter, which is at Four Bears Books. And I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again, it is more important than ever to support independent bookshops. And the more business we put their way, and the more likely we are to see their survival and a continuing wealth of vibrant books like these ones being published. With shops opening in a few weeks, many independents are struggling to afford stock and really quite uncertain about the future, whether people are going to turn up, and it's a tricky time. So now let's support them. Let's show our support wherever we can. If you have a question at any point, use the Q&A facility, which is at the bottom of your screen, and we'll leave lots of time at the end to go through them. And translator Rachel Ward will be joining us, so don't hesitate to ask her questions too, and we'll come to them when she arrives. So congratulations to Vanda, Simona, Rachel, and I'm going to hand you over to Craig now. And get off your screen.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Can everyone see us okay at the moment? I've still got Karen on screen.
Yes,
well, welcome.
We can all hear you and we can all see you.
Yeah, that's good. Welcome to the launch of two fantastic books from the opposite ends of the earth by two brilliant authors. And it's my complete and utter privilege to be here. I was saying to everyone just before we started, actually, that this is kind of an anniversary event for me, because the very last public event I went to before the lockdown in London was actually the launch of Simone and Vanda's prior book, along with Steph Broadrib, who's another brilliant Orenda author as well. So I am very happy that we do get to celebrate these two wonderful authors and these two wonderful books. I've read them both. I love them both. They're both outstanding. I can't think of a better way to spend my night in London with these two amazing ladies, really. And we're all lucky enough that we get to do so as well. I thought we'd just dive right in, because you want to hear from them, not me. And I thought we could talk a little bit about the settings of their books, because I find them both really fascinating, both Chastity Riley in Hamburg and Sam Shepard in Dunedin and surrounding Otago countryside and things like that. And I thought we'd start with you, Simona, is what made you decide to set the book in Hamburg, and how do you try and evoke the sense of the city? Because some authors like to set books away from where they live, so they have some distance, whereas you've kind of set it in a place that you know very well. So what made you choose that way back in the day when you started?
Maybe it's about my writing table location, as you might see. Just behind me are the streets of Hamburg. And I have to admit that I was a journalist before I started to write novels. And to me, writing is kind of picturing reality. And writing crime novels is writing neorealism. So to me, it was absolutely clear from the beginning that I'm writing about my everyday life and the city I'm living in. And of course, the people I hear talking in the bars, in the streets. And there was never just the thought of of another setting, another. So I think that this kind of novels I'm writing, they don't really need Hamburg. They just need a harbor, that kind of harbor noir. So they can be set in, could be set in every other city with a harbor. But to me, it wouldn't make sense. I think I have to have my people around, and the way they are talking in my streets.
Well, your books are set now after the first one, which was in a farmland, Vanda, but the most recent three are all set in a harbour city as well. Perhaps we could get a Chastity Sam crossover at some point, with Dunedin being a harbour city as well.
Ooh.
But what was it about Otago that made you want to set your books there? Because when you did start writing them, when you started working on them 15 years ago in New Zealand in terms of manuscripts, there wasn't a lot of New Zealand crime writing, and a lot of New Zealand authors were told to set their books in the UK or the US if they wanted to do okay. So what was it that made you set it at home, despite all of that?
It was just being a staunch, proud Kiwi who wasn't going to be told where she could not set her books. But interestingly, what you said, Simona, I wasn't living in Dunedin when I started setting the books in Dunedin. I was probably I came here for university, and so I had very, very fond memories of the city. But the first book, Overkill, was set in Mataura, and that's in further south in the South Island of New Zealand. And the reason that I chose Mataura was I needed a river and a meatworks. And so I Googled and came up with Mataura. And I thought, actually, yeah, the South Island just felt really heartland New Zealand. And Dunedin, again, as a larger city, when Sam needed to relocate to somewhere else that to her would seem like a really big city because she had come from a small rural town earlier, Dunedin just made sense. And it's also got, a harbour and lovely green trees and ocean as well, ocean beach, and lots of sort of like Gothic architecture that's a little bit run down, so it's got that edge of just sort of slightly shabbiness to it as well, but a lovely, wonderful atmosphere. So I couldn't imagine writing this series with Sam anywhere else.
Yeah, because for those who are watching and who haven't been to New Zealand or Dunedin, it's actually, although New Zealand was a British colony originally, before it became an independent nation, Dunedin's a very Scottish city, not an English city. Like Christchurch is a much more English city, whereas Dunedin was actually settled by Scots. And so it has a slightly different vibe to the other cities in New Zealand, doesn't it, Vanda? So.
Yes. Well, it's the alternative name for Edinburgh, and it's all our street names are named after Edinburgh. So we've got Moray Place and the Octagon and George Street, and they were trying to mirror the experience here. They got the weather, they got driving horizontal rain, so that's why the early settlers from Scotland decided this is the perfect place. It's wet, it's draining, it's windy, perfect.
Fantastic. And Simone, although you've largely set your series in Hamburg, which you know so well, the most recent book, actually quite a chunk of it is set elsewhere. And do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Obviously, we don't want to give any spoilers away, but it's from an early stage in the book, is that you actually have kind of twin timelines and twin locations that you're talking about throughout the story. And do you want to talk us about the decision to do that and to take the story quite far away from Hamburg as well?
When I decided to tell a story about the wounds life is giving to people, the way life is hitting people, I thought about something that can destroy a whole life. And then it went very quickly that I thought, yeah, it has to be cocaine, because that's what I see in this harbor city, like maybe in every harbor city, where you have this open flank of the big port, and just every trash in drugs is coming in. So I really quickly convinced myself that I have to tell a cocaine story. And if you're talking about cocaine, you have to go to Colombia. And though I never been there, I talked a lot to the drug force specialists in Hamburg, who are very, very involved in the whole cocaine thing, because it's a big issue in this city. And the one part of the story is set in Hamburg in a hotel bar with overlooking the harbor, and the second part starts in the 80s with a young guy who wants to leave this formerly gray city, and a guy who had no chances to find happiness here, and he just stepped on a boat like people did it in the 80s, and worked there and went on the boat and got off wherever he wanted to, and he got off in Cartagena, and then it went really quickly to get involved in the cocaine business, and that was his big mistake. And I think crime novels are always about normal people making this one mistake, changing their whole lives, and that's what it's about. That this guy tries to repair his mistake, but it doesn't work.
Well, since you're bringing up cocaine and the drugs that are involved in the story, which are a big kind of one of many themes, but a big theme in Hotel Cartagena, Alexander Hall has actually put in a question, so I thought I'd ask that now. Right? We will answer quite a few audience questions at the end, so do put them in the Q&A if you'd like them to be answered. I'll try and get to as many as I can. I'll sprinkle some in as we go as well. And Alex is, who many of us know, has asked a really good question. Hi guys, as both of your books involve drugs, could you tell us the most complicated part of your research and the effects you saw when you looked into drugs and their impact and things like that? So, do you want to start with that one, Vanda?
The research wasn't, but I wouldn't say as complicated, because I was dealing more with the shipping of ingredients, and also some interesting nutraceuticals in my book. My background's actually, my undergraduate degrees in pharmacy, so I sort of already had quite a bit of that kind of knowledge there. The hardest thing about it was not disappearing down rabbit holes of research when you got sidetracked by all the other interesting things you found when you were Googling strange things. I hope no one ever checks my search criteria on Google ever, because it would be really bad.
Where can I hide a body in Dunedin?
Yeah.
I imagine your search history would be quite similar to mine. So.
The most difficult thing was not the whole crime thing or the investigations thing about organized crime, because I have very, very good sources here at the Hamburg police who are really happy to talk to me, and this is quite easy. But I had there's one party in the book in Cartagena on the top of a hotel, of a high building, and this is a classic cocaine party. And I'm sorry, I never took this. I'm not into cocaine, so I got absolutely no clue. And normally, when I go to parties, I don't realize if there's anything, because I'm a greenhorn in this cases. So that was quite difficult for me to write something that I never experienced, because normally I try to get in the stuff I'm writing about, and this kind of festivity was not my cup of tea. So I really had to talk with a lot of people very deeply about how does it feel, how does it move you around, what do you want from it. So I found that complicated, because people don't like to talk about it, because it's talking about kind of an addiction, and that was not easy, I have to admit.
It's interesting you bring up the cocaine party and the kind of up in the hotel, because that's a very interesting part of your book that I would like to touch on. I thought I would just actually read for people, because I actually just recently reviewed your book, though the review hasn't been published yet, for a magazine down in Vanda's part of the world, where this is how I described Hotel Cartagena, just a sentence. Simone Buchholz writes like the noir equivalent of a jazz musician, offsetting familiar elements with originality and style, leading readers unsure where the melody of her Chastity Riley series is going. Yes, I'm quite a fan. I think it's very good. But
Thank you.
one thing that I loved is that I actually read Hotel Cartagena earlier this year, and it was one of those strange life moments you have where I'd been looking after my daughter and I'd been online that day, and it had been the anniversary of Alan Rickman's death, and I decided to read your book that night when I went to bed, and I opened it up, and the very first thing I saw was that it was dedicated to Alan Rickman. And it was just one of those weird moments, kind of thing, where I was literally reading it on the anniversary of his death when everyone had been posting about him, and everyone's like, what Alan Rickman book movie will we watch tonight? And I was just like, I just feel like reading for some reason. And I pick it up and I turn it, and it's dedicated to Alan Rickman. And then we have a setup of terrorists taking over a party in a high-rise, which is like, this is a very Alan Rickman character book we've got going on here. And I remember a few years ago when you and I talked for an interview, I asked you, as I ask a lot of authors, who they could see playing themselves in a movie rather than their own characters. And you actually answered Bruce Willis, which I thought was really interesting at the time.
Did I say, really?
Yeah, you did. And you might have just been tongue-in-cheek, but I'm like, clearly there's some die-hard kind of stuff going on here, the inspiration for the book. And was that just a nod to him as an actor? The fact that he plays East German in the movie as well, is Die Hard highly regarded in Germany? It's very highly regarded in the UK and New Zealand and Australia and stuff like
Yes,
that.
it is, and I fucking love it. I'm sorry, I adore Bruce Willis, and I love the Die Hard series, and Alan Rickman, who I really, really adored and loved. I was very sad when he passed too early. And he plays this German villain guy who's named Hans Gruber.
Mm-hmm.
And my guy, the hostage taker, is called Henning Gabarek. So you see the trick I made.
Yeah.
I've just binged watched the Die Hard series for about the fifth time.
Best Christmas movie of all time. We're not even going to have that debate. We're not even going to debate whether it's a Christmas movie or not. Best Christmas movie of all time. I mean, must watch every Christmas. So. But yeah, and there were definitely some nice nods, both in terms of the terrorists perhaps being far more charming than some of the people that he'd actually taken hostage, where you actually kind of liked the terrorists more than some of the hostages, kind of things. That's similar to Die Hard as well. And Vanda, I wanted to talk a bit about character with both you and Simone, in terms of you both have these incredibly terrific female protagonists who are nuanced and layered, and there's lots going on. They're very real, and they're both imperfect in that they mess things up and they take different actions, but they're very, very human and very interesting, and just two of the most engaging protagonists, I think, in crime fiction that I've read in recent years. And so I wanted both of you to tell us a little bit, and perhaps you can start, Vanda, about the genesis of the character. And was it that you had this character before you had the idea for the first book, or did you have a plot idea or a setup and then the character kind of barged their way into the door? So Vanda, do you want to tell us a little bit about the origins of Sam?
So one of the things I was really aware of when I was setting character was that at the time when I started writing, it was like every police detective was divorced, an alcoholic, had a little penchant for jazz music, and these really dysfunctional individuals. And I really, really wanted to avoid that. Interestingly, when I first started writing Overkill, I wrote it from the perspective of a man. So my protagonist started out being a male. But then one day my husband did something really so dumb that I thought, I cannot understand the man I'm married to. How the hell do I think I can inhabit the head of a character who's a male? So I thought, stuff this, I'm going to swap it to being a female. And pretty much essentially the moment I did that, Sam Shepard arrived pretty much fully formed. which was amazing, and it was revelationary for when I was writing her. But some of the things I was really aware of, and people often ask, are you Sam? And I'm like, oh hell no, I'm way too polite, and Mum told me I wasn't allowed to swear, so she's not me at all. Probably if she had any of my particular traits, it would be a foolish optimism in everybody and humanity, and also, you know, a sense of humor. But I wanted her to be, let's say, approachable and feel realistic with real people problems, and someone who was, you know, driven career-wise, had a really strong sense of what was right and wrong, but was always going to bat for the underdog, you know, always think just outside the square, not be willing to just accept anything. So yeah, she was arrived pretty much fully formed. The only real thing that I made particularly about Sam was that she's physically very, very short, and I did that on purpose because my mum, you know, she only came up to here. She was just squinked in over 5 foot tall, and she was small but mighty. She always took it seriously, but she always used to say that one of the things she always felt that was because she was small, people didn't take her seriously. And that was just one of her little bits of things where she wasn't feeling confident. But I wanted to turn that on its head a wee bit, because if people don't take you seriously, they underestimate you. And if they underestimate you, you can use that as a strength in a character. So, you know, you underestimate Sam at your peril.
She is really a wonderful character, and I'm so glad that readers all around the world now, thanks to Orenda, are getting to experience her, which is really cool. And Simone, what was the genesis of Chastity? Because my understanding is there's 4 books that have been translated in English, but there's actually a few books before that in German. Is that right? Or are there other Chastity tales we haven't seen in English yet? But what was the origin of that character for you? So.
It was funnily quite similar in a way to the origin of Sam Shepard, because I always wanted to, you know, when I was young, I was a huge Raymond Chandler fan. I am still. And I was always in love with Philip Marlowe and these hard-boiled detectives. And then I was reading Jacob Arjuni, who's also translated into English, and he wrote a series about a Turkish detective in the Frankfurt station. The part of the city around the station was very dirty and gray and gritty, and this guy is called Kemal Kayankaya. And when I read this, I thought, wow, you can take Philip Marlowe, this American hard-boiled guy, and put him into a German big city, and you can do this. And so if you can do this, maybe you can also make this detective female. So it was definitely the character who was there first. I'm always about character and never about plotting. Unfortunately, I have to learn this a bit more, I think. But yeah, the origin is also from, there's a man, and turn the detective or the state prosecutor in Riley's case into a woman. And it's still fun, I have to admit. It's still special to me to always try to figure out where's the female part and where's the male part, because she is also kind of changeling in the way. She is sometimes more female, sometimes more male.
Why did you decide to make her a prosecutor rather than a police detective?
Oh, this is very simple, because I wanted her to be powerful, and she is as a prosecutor, because she is deciding, are we investigating or not? But she isn't in Germany, she isn't allowed to wear a gun. She isn't allowed to wear a weapon. So she's also vulnerable. And so she has to have people around her who are allowed or not allowed to wear guns, but do, to protect her. And I really like to tell groups in stories. So I needed a group around her, kind of a family.
And kind of talking about that with guns and groups, Vanda, is I guess a lot of people don't necessarily realise that the New Zealand police, as a matter of course, don't carry firearms. Like they have them in the cars, and if they can get them if they need to, but they're not like American or other police that carry them as a matter of course and things like that. So Sam has that to deal with as well, that she's not usually armed with the gun. Actually, she's not. That's a little different.
She's armed with a mouth.
Yeah, exactly. She's armed with her mouth. But do you want to tell us a little bit about the supporting characters around Sam? Because that's one of the things I love. And similar with Simone's books, there's this wonderful you have these amazing central characters who are really terrific. And then you've got a really interesting cast around them, some of whom recur over multiple books and some who come and go. But do you want to tell us a little bit? Because there is some really interesting arcs to the character relationships in Bound and things like that.
Yes. Well, no, none of us live in isolation. Well, actually, at the present, unfortunately, I happen to be living in isolation. But and generally speaking, you know, we have friends, we have family, we have work colleagues, all of whom we have relationships with. That can be from the simple and supportive to the complex and the destructive. So, you know, and I wanted Sam just to be normal, so she had to have these things. One of my favorite characters is her gal pal Maggie. In fact, you know, I'm more of a Maggie than a Sam, absolutely, definitely. And she needed, you know, Sam, she's so busy thinking about other people, she needed to have someone who had her back, and Maggie has always got her back. That, and they both have an addiction for toffee pops and tea and Milo, and, you know, Weet-Bix at any time of the day, or Weetabix, as somebody was pointing out on Twitter that you call it over there. So it was really important for her to have, you know, a really good solid friend. Also relationships. She's sort of got this, not sure if I want it, not sure if I do. I know I want, yes, I do. No, I don't want relationship with Paul, who is also a colleague, which brings another sort of element of friction there, because, you know, having to work with someone who you are trying to form a budding relationship with, but trying not to, because, you know, let's be frank, all my life I've been told you don't screw the crew. So, you know, that sort of professionalism there. She's got quite a frosty relationship, not a frosty, a tense relationship with her mother. People often ask me, oh, you know, were you like that with your mum? And I'm like, oh no, me and my mum were absolutely best friends. But she that relationship where she's always feeling that she's never approved of by her mum, yet her dad just absolutely loved her to pieces. You know, another difficult relationship. And then, you know, she's got the relationship with her work colleagues. In the other books, she's got Smithy, who's always sort of like been her mentor, but he's having his own personal issues at the moment, so she can't rely on him quite so much. And she's got a very, very difficult relationship with her boss and employer, because, you know, there are bullies and you know, sexist, horrible people out there. So you know, I wanted her life to reflect what just so many of us encounter in everyday life.
Yeah, that's very true. And I mean, Chastity has some similar issues in terms of screwing the crew and things like that in your books as well, doesn't she, Simone? So there's some complications there. I have a question about character actually from David Harris that we could ask, because it's kind of on point. He says, Vanda and Simone, will there ever be a book when Sam or Chastity have an easy time? I feel that I could answer that, but I'm going to let you ladies answer that. Simone, will you ever go easy on Chastity?
Actually, with the next book, which is set mainly in Scotland and Glasgow, she, you know, at the end of Hotel Cartagena, she's really torn into pieces, and I have to repair her. I had to repair her. That was really my feeling, that I can't. Yeah, I have to heal her somehow. So maybe in the first half, on the first 4, let's say 3 quarters, it's still hard for her, but in the end, in the last quarter, she's kind of happy, and she's easy, and she feels a relief, and yeah, which was surprising for me, because I didn't I didn't expect that it would be so easy to make her feel easy. But I think she needed it.
I'm so pleased to hear that there's another one on the way, because the way that Hotel Cartagena comes together, it almost feels like the end of some kind of chapter in her journey and things like that, or a shift in her journey. So I was like, I hope that there'll continue to be more and more stories, because she's such a fabulous character. And do you want to tell us a little bit about the next Sam book, the one that you're working on, Vanda?
Oh, spoilers.
Just give us the back cover blurb.
Okay, so well, in response to the very first question you're asking, will I ever take it easy on Sam? I think the readers would be really disappointed if I did, to be honest. But no, I would. She's always going to have stuff hurled at her, but on the other hand of that, I'll always make sure that she's got the people there to support her when she needs it. So I'm always going to be throwing her in the deep end, as it were. But I wouldn't throw her into anything that I didn't think she could cope with.
Yeah, very true. So sorry everyone there, if you saw that, I had to go turn my light on because it's getting dark here in London now, and I had light streaming in the window. It was natural light before that. I thought now might be a good time. I'm not sure if she's ready, Fiona, but we could perhaps bring Rachel Ward in, who's Simone's translator, because it would be really cool to talk to her, because I think sometimes we forget how important translators are for all of us, who don't speak those languages, to be able to kind of enjoy these wonderful stories. And I love Simone's stories, and I know about 5 words in German, so my only way I can read them is thanks to Rachel Ward. So big thanks to her. And Rachel, I was wondering if you wanted to tell us a little bit about what it's like to translate Simone's stories about chastity, because Simone is such a poetic kind of writer, and she has such an energy in her prose that I imagine it must be tough to do a direct translation, because you're trying to keep some of that style and some of the poetry of her prose as well. So how do you approach translating one of her books?
Hi, it's Mona. I guess kind of the same way I translate anything, in that you're always trying to put your voice away and bring out the voice of the person that you're translating. So with Simona, I do much the same as with anybody. I do a first draft that's relatively fast and has lots of alternatives and slashes and every synonym that I can think of for a word, and big chunks in bold, which means what on earth is this? I need to come back to this. And then as it goes through a series of drafts and rereading, it sort of somehow filters through Simona's voice in my head somehow, and it sort of hopefully comes out sounding like Simona, only in English, which is a really vague answer and not very helpful, but that's...
I imagine it must be a little bit like trying to be a biographer or an autobiographer more so, where you're trying to give the story of the person, or the people who ghostwrite the celebrity biographies and things like that, where you're trying to convey the voice of the kind of original person as much as possible, while using your writing skills to bring that to the audience and things like that, though obviously extra degrees of difficulty being that it's in a different language and things like that.
I think there are kind of similarities there. There was an article in the Author magazine a couple of issues back about ghostwriting, and I remember reading it and thinking that it was rather like translation in some ways.
Sorry, can I just ask a quick question? Because I've got you on screen. How do you get on with with the translation, with getting that sense of rhythm and lyricism when you're going from one language to the next, when some are quite guttural, from the German to more flowing languages?
Well, I only work with German and French, and I don't do a great deal of French these days. It's mostly German, so it's not so much of an issue sort of from one language to another. But yeah, there is a, in English, we're lucky in that we have so many words for almost anything. There's a heap of synonyms, and some of them are more Germanic and some of them are more Frenchy, Latin-y, and so sometimes we have the advantage that we can sort of say, actually, I don't want to use this word that looks like the one. I can use this other word, sort of, that somehow has more of a rhythm to it. But I do always read Simone's books, particularly anything where the voice is really important. I read it aloud as the final stage of the draft, because I kind of learned that with a children's book, which I did before I had children myself, and then when I read it to my son when he was small, I said, "Oh, this is terrible! It sounds so awful when you read it aloud." So I've learned from that to read that if the voice is the really important thing, then I need to read it aloud and see if the voice is there.
But you have a special talent, Rachel, I have to admit. Yeah, I always call her the sound system, because I don't know how she does it, but she's kind of eating the sound and spitting it out again. It's really cool. And this is kind of magic for me. It's really, really wonderful.
I imagine it must be an interesting situation for you, Simone, as well, because it's being translated into a language that you can actually speak and understand yourself to some degree, like quite well. Whereas if it was being translated into, say, Korean, you would have no idea what the translation is like. Whereas if it's being translated into a language you can also speak, like English, you can read it afterwards. So does that kind of affect, the collaboration you have, or like, was there ever any thought, because some authors, I have seen some European language authors who write their books in English as well. Was there ever any thought of writing in English in the first place and stuff like that?
Oh no, I couldn't do that. Never. But I have to admit that it sounds so much better in English than in German. It's just a cooler language. So it to me, it always sounds like I read it like reading a pop song. And I think, wow, this is really, really cool. And you don't have these long German words that I always try to avoid. Sorry. But yeah, it's so much fun, and it's such a pleasure to read it in English, of course. My Finnish translator, she's really great and precise too, but I don't understand one letter in the Finnish book. But to read it in English is really, it's wonderful, especially because I'm such a big Graeme Chandler fan. Like I can smuggle myself a bit in his direction with Rachel's help. That's how it feels for me.
That's really awesome. Yeah, I was actually, I wrote an article about crime fiction translators for an American magazine about 2 or 3 years ago, and it was really fascinating to talk to translators. But also, I talked to a professor at a London university who kind of explained to me how crime fiction translation is almost more difficult than a lot of other literary translation, and so many people from the outside don't realize that, because there's so much misdirection in crime and mysteries, and there's so many things where words are important because of the meaning they have or they don't, and whether they give clues or not, that there's these extra layers of difficulty for the translator of not making something too obscure so the clue is gone, but also not making it too obvious. And there's some classic cases of some Agatha Christie being translated into German, actually, and the word choice by the translator actually gave the culprit away way earlier in the book accidentally, because it could have been a number of different words, but the word they chose And there's this classic story that this professor of translation told me about. But so I was really admiring of people like Rachel, because I couldn't read the books without them. But also it's an incredibly difficult thing that I think often goes underrated, a little bit like illustrators in children's books. Not to get off topic, but illustrators in children's books are often a little bit undervalued when they're so vitally important and stuff to reading. It's like that. But we'll go to some more audience questions now. We've still got a little while, which is great. Michelle Shearer Barnfather, I hope I've pronounced that right, says, for Simone, where did the name Chastity Riley come from? It's not a typical German name.
Yeah, of course it's not. She's half German, half American. Her father was an American soldier. He was living in Frankfurt in the middle of Germany. And so the name Chastity was the idea of a colleague who was sitting with me in the office, and I just didn't think about it. I just thought it has to be something from the southern states in the USA, because I wanted her father to be from North Carolina. And so my friend said, my colleague said, yeah, call it Chastity. That's how the girls are named there. And Riley is actually an Irish Scottish name, because she has Irish Scottish roots. That's why I sent her to Glasgow in the next book. And I was in Glasgow 2005 in the stadium watching a Celtic match, and there was a striker, and I found him really cute, and he was called Nicky Riley. And the mystery is that friends in Glasgow have did some research about Nicky Riley, and he never played for Celtic. He was always sitting on the bench, but I saw him playing in 2005, and this is really a mystery. So yeah, that's the story. Many unanswered questions in it.
I actually have a question for Rachel here from David Harris. I have to ask Rachel about a certain pun in Hotel Cartagena. The worst, spelt W-U-R-S-T, is yet to come. Was that a deliberate challenge from Simone?
I don't know if it was deliberate from Simona or not, but we were talking about this yesterday in a chat we were doing for somebody else. Yeah, the German pun is, so the German, it says ein Mann, ein Wurst, which means one man, one sausage, but it's a pun on ein Mann, ein Wort, one man, one word, which means I am a man of my words. I keep my word. If I say I'll do something, I'll do it, that kind of thing. And so after we sort of played around a little bit, trying to decide if one man, one Wurst sounded like anything at all in English, and deciding that it didn't, I sort of sent Simona a heap of puns related to sausages or Wurst, and we got to the Wurst is yet to come, and she said, yes, that one, do that one.
Fantastic. And we have a question for you as well, Vanda. When Sam visits Auckland and Bound, she really doesn't seem keen on the place. Is it that bad a place?
No. Sam
Sam
may possibly have reflected my I really don't enjoy going to Auckland thing. It is a stunning city. It's a harbour city. You know, Simona, we could take them to Auckland, or in many harbours around. We could just do a harbour around the world thing. It is a beautiful city, but how Sam feels about first going to Dunedin is how I feel like going to Auckland, and that Dunedin 120,000, Auckland 1.7 million. There's traffic. It was just that everyone seems to get in their cars at exactly the same time of day and hit the roads at the same time of day. And I'm not the best person in crowds, and I get impatient with cars and things. So that was a bit of a reflection of the author's liking to going to Auckland, and liking even more to leave Auckland. But I recommend, if you're ever traveling to New Zealand, do spend time in Auckland. It is a fantastic city.
I've got to say, as a New Zealander who also grew up in the South Island, well, actually, Vanda didn't grow up in the South Island, but I did. So I grew up in Nelson in the South Island, is that New Zealanders from outside of Auckland don't have a very good they don't really like Auckland much. Some of it's a competitive thing, some of it's the big city thing, a little bit like Americans with New York. You either love it or hate it.
It's the national sport, bagging people from Auckland.
Or in the UK with London, and stuff like that. So it's similar to that. But having lived there and then lived in different places around around the world, while I was early on when I came to London, there was one of those best places to live surveys that came out from like UNESCO or someone like that, and they did all the stuff, traffic and education and income and rents and everything. And Auckland came out as the 5th most livable city in New Zealand. In the world, the 5th most livable city in the world. And kind of the reaction is summed up by most people around the world going, of course, it's the big city in New Zealand, it's got harbours and beaches and all this great stuff. And everyone in New Zealand's like, what the hell? Kind of thing. So, and that kind of sums up the attitude. On a global scale, it's a fantastic big city. In New Zealand, it's seen as the big city with lots of traffic and skyscrapers compared to everywhere else around the country.
So in the book, when Sam goes there, you can imagine a girl that came from a town of 600, how she'd react to being in a city with 1.7 million people. And she wasn't there for fun, she was there for work.
Cool. Just seeing if we've got some other questions from here. I think there was one from Anne Cater that I'm not sure if Karen's intending to answer that herself. I'm sorry if you are, Karen. Anne has a burning desire to see a novel co-authored by Simone and Will Carver. I think that pairing would be incredible. Did you want to answer that, Karen, or do you want Simone to talk about that?
No, I was answering her, and I didn't realize it would make her question disappear. So please do answer that.
Simone, would you ever co-write a book with an author? And if you did, would you like to do it with Will Carver?
Of course, with nobody else. With nobody else, only with Will Carver.
That would be some book. I'm trying to think of the different elements you two would bring together.
Yeah.
I'd buy it.
See us in hell.
Yeah.
I think someone should announce that on Twitter and alert Will.
Yeah, exactly. Is there any authors you would love to co-author a book with, Vanda, from around the world, whether they're in the Orenda stable or elsewhere?
Gosh, that's actually a really hard question. The first author that flew into my head was Auntie. Tuominen from Finland.
I love this. Really cool.
Funny.
Wow, yeah, it would be so much fun.
That would be interesting as well. Maybe we need to get an Orenda short story collection with all of you writing a different short story, but crossing over with each other's characters and worlds or something like that would be quite a lot of fun.
Yeah, let's go wild. Come on.
Yeah. So since this is a massive celebration of books tonight, and we've got just a handful of minutes left, but since this is a celebration of books and we're celebrating these two fantastic authors and these two fantastic books, please do go and buy them. If you would like a signed copy, get it from Four Bears. They're terrific and amazing independent bookstore. But make sure you get your hands on the books. They're great. And get the whole series, not just the new one. Get the whole series. Fill it up. They're all awesome. I highly recommend them. But most writers are readers as well. So would you like to tell us about a couple of books you guys have been reading recently during lockdown and the pandemic, or in Vanda's case, normal life that's going on in New Zealand, hardly anywhere else. But what are a couple of books you've read this year that you really like and you'd recommend, particularly crime novels?
Golly. It was interesting. During lockdown, I found my reading brain went to mush. And I couldn't concentrate very well on long form fiction. So I didn't, apart from the books I had to read, because I was also judging Noir Marsh books and things at the time.
Oh, yeah.
I found myself actually heading more to non-fiction and essays and things where that you could read a small satisfactory chunk. So I actually read a lot more non-fiction during that period, the time that I did, than fiction books. So and obscure weird things. I read the H is for Hawk, which was fabulous, by Helen MacDonald, and I've been just the other thing I've been doing is trying to, because I can't travel the world at the moment, read from around the world. So at the moment, I can't remember the title of it because, I go blank when people ask me these questions on the names of the titles and the authors, but, a translated book from Japan. So I'm in Japan at the moment, and really enjoying Japan. And so, one of my things for this coming year is actually to read novels from all around the world.
Ours, is there for that?
Yes, exactly. There are plenty in your stable.
You might need to add a
I'll
Japanese
send
crime
you
writer
some.
though, Karen. You could probably add a Japanese crime writer though, Karen. There's some great Japanese crime.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
that'd be cool.
know. Whereas we would never been submitted. We'd have never had one on submission ever.
What about? I'm not sure if Karen wants to dive in here, but perhaps Simone's got a minute that she can talk about some books she's loved before you dive in.
I read a lot of graphic novels, I have to admit, because I was like Vanda, not in the state of mind of reading fiction, and I'm homeschooling for 1 year already. I'm still not in the mindset of reading fiction. I have to produce fiction and novels I can't read. So I read a lot of cartoon books by Tom Gold. I love him. It was fantastic. It really made me laugh and I felt good. And I read Moby Dick as a graphic novel and things. And I read a non-fiction book about the Erebus. Maybe you've all seen The Terror on Amazon, the series, but the really interesting ship wasn't the Terror, it was the Erebus. So, and there's a really, really beautiful non-fiction book by Michael Palin, the one of the Monty Python Flying Circus guys. And he wrote about the Erebus, and I really loved that. It was kind of an adventure thing, but non-fiction too.
Yeah, I love that. I love those sort of discovery things.
Totally. I love it. I love it. Man in the cold.
I love the Terror.
Yeah, of course. I love it.
Don't you think that Matt Veselovsky could do something brilliant with the Terror?
Can
you hear me okay? Because I'm struggling here with my Wi-Fi connection. You guys are ring on and off.
We can hear you.
Okay, good.
So I get the feeling that it's almost time to get the hook. If we were in person, I'd be getting looks from the festival organizer on the side to get off stage and get everyone in the signing queue. Unfortunately, we can't do that right now, though of course the signed books are available. 4 Bears, go to 4 Bears, get the signed books. And then maybe next time we can see these lovely ladies in person, you can get the little message added above the signature. But Karen, did you want to say anything to wind up?
I just really wanted to say thank you, Craig, and thank you for such a brilliant event, and thank you to Simona and Rachel, who I think is there, and Vanda for coming along tonight, and to everyone in the audience who has once again supported us, and we are so grateful for this. And it was such a fun evening, actually. I could sit here all night if my Wi-Fi connection would allow. But don't forget, as Craig said, there she is. That has appeared back on my screen. Signed books are available, exclusive signed books are available from Four Bears Books in Reading, and we definitely want to support them if you can. I should also say that we have a brand new website. If you haven't seen it, come and take a look, because it's just decimated the last 2 weeks of my life, but it looks great. And you can see what's coming up from all of the other authors, and I can happily say that there is another Sam Shepard coming, and there is another Chastity Riley coming next year. So this time next year, hopefully we will be together in person. And for those of you who have only managed to come to our events via live feed, we will make sure that we have something like this for you too, because I love the inclusivity of it, even if everyone is sick to death of looking at their own faces. But it's been a brilliant evening. I would just like to say a little tiny thank you to the Goethe Institute, who helped to make the translation of Simona's wonderful books possible. And I don't think any of them are here tonight, but we're grateful for their support. Yeah, so thank you very much. Thank you, Craig. And have a lovely evening, everyone.
Have a wonderful night, guys, and a wonderful morning if, like Vanda, you're in New Zealand.
Yes, you can see the lights just dawning in New Zealand now. So
wonderful.
Tell us all about the future,
tomorrow.
Tell us all about the future.
It's Wednesday.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Alex from 4 Bears Books in Reading.
Yes.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I could just stay here
Yeah.
staring at my.
And I think we're in that like leaving a party stage where none of us knows who's meant to be shutting the door. Is the problem.
I'm always
Okay.
the last one to leave.
Yeah, I say goodbye.
Do it.